Level 1. The Custodial Trust Kid. Storytelling. The account has your name on it. The signature line does not. You are 7 years old, or 11, or 15. It does not matter. Somewhere in a bank's back office, a document exists with 6 figures next to your name. $50,000. Maybe $500,000. You did not open the account. You cannot close it. You cannot touch it. This is a custodial trust. In most U.S. states, the law calls it UTMA or UGMA. The rules are simple. The money is yours, on paper, the moment it is deposited. In practice, it belongs to whoever signs for you: a parent, a guardian, a stranger with a law degree. You will not see a dollar of it until 18, sometimes 21. The custodian decides what counts as a reasonable expense along the way. A violin lesson? Approved. A bicycle? Approved. Anything larger waits for the date on the paperwork. Encyclopedia entries define the upper class the same way, over and over. Not by income, but by the possession of wealth someone else already accumulated. You were born into that definition before you could spell your own last name. Here is the part no one explains to a child holding a savings passbook. The account is not a gift. It is a delay, a promise with the due date attached, and someone else holding the calendar. Your friends get $20 for a good report card. You get a line item in a trust document neither of you understands. Neither of you calls it what it is. At school, you learn to say nothing about it. Not because anyone told you to, because there is no good way to explain a number that large, attached to a person that small. This is the smallest, safest version of the system. It will not stay small. Level 2. The College Fund Heir. It does not stay small. By 18, the number has a purpose. The trust converts $1 to $5 million, positioned for tuition, a first apartment, sometimes a car that arrives with no loan attached. You do not fill out financial aid forms. You do not do the math on interest rates. Someone already did. You still go to class. You still take an internship. You still stand in line at orientation like everyone else in the room. But your roommate works a shift on weekends to cover rent. You do not. What your roommate calls a survival job, you call a formality. Something for a resume, not something you actually need. Researchers who study wealth across generations have found something that surprises most people. Direct transfers, the cash itself, explain less than 20% of why wealthy parents raise wealthy children. The rest comes from somewhere quieter. Better schools, better introductions, a marriage that happens to consolidate 2 family balance sheets instead of 2 incomes. You are not rich because of the money in the account. You are rich because of what the money was allowed to buy before you even noticed it was buying anything. There is a particular kind of guilt that comes with this. Not loud, not dramatic. The kind that shows up when a friend asks what you're doing after graduation, and you realize the question does not quite apply to you the way it applies to them. You smile. You change the subject. What your roommate calls a survival job, you call a formality. Neither of you says this out loud. Level 3. The Quiet Millionaire. By your late 20s, you do not need a job. This is Level 3, and this is where the isolation starts. $10 to $50 million, most of it sitting quietly in index funds, working while you are not. You could stop entirely. Some people at this level do. No office to report to, no manager to answer for, no alarm clock with consequences attached to it. This should feel like freedom. For the first few months, it does. Then the calls slow down. Not because anyone decided anything. Old friends are climbing a ladder you already climbed by being born. Their conversations fill with promotions, layoffs, mortgages. Yours do not. You learn to nod along instead of contributing. You cannot tell most people the actual number. Not because you were instructed not to, because there is no good response to it. Sympathy sounds fake. Envy sounds worse. Silence is easier. Psychologists who study sudden and inherited wealth describe a specific loneliness that shows up here. A private identity crisis, invisible from the outside, built entirely from money nobody around you can see. It rarely gets sympathy, because it is not supposed to need any. You start meeting people who are also quiet about it. You recognize each other by what is missing from the conversation. No complaints about a boss, no mention of a paycheck, no urgency about Monday. It is its own kind of club. Nobody sends an invitation. Nobody advertises the address. You spend money carefully, out of habit more than necessity. Not because you have to, because being seen spending it is its own kind of exposure. And you have not reached the level yet where exposure is simply the price of admission. Nobody envies a rank they can't see. That is exactly the point. Level 4. The Shareholder-Heir. At level 4, the money stops being quiet. $50 to $100 million, most of it tied up in shares of a company with your last name already on the door. You are added to the board before you are added to a mortgage application. 22 years old, sometimes younger, sitting at the far end of a long table with people who built the company you were simply given a piece of. You hold a folder with your own surname printed on the cover. You did not design the letterhead. You did not hire the people in this room. You are, on paper, one of the people responsible for their jobs. The seat is real. The authority is not. Not yet. Executives who have run divisions for 20 years defer to you in the meeting and quietly overrule you afterward. You are technically a decision maker. You are actually being watched to see if you can be trusted with the decisions you already have the legal right to make. This is where the first real contradiction of inherited wealth shows up in daylight. The title arrives before the competence does. Nobody says this to your face. Everyone in the room already knows it. You spend the first year mostly listening. You learn which questions make you sound prepared, and which ones make you sound like exactly what you are. Someone who inherited a chair, not a career. Family businesses that survive past a single generation tend to share one habit. They put heirs in the room early, ready or not, because the alternative, waiting for readiness, has its own risks. Nobody wants to be the branch of the family that lost its seat by hesitating. So you sit. You watch. You sign what you are told carries your name well. You inherited a seat at the table. You did not inherit a vote everyone respects. Level 5. The Family Office Client. Past $100 million, something changes that nobody announces in advance. You stop managing your own money. This is the family office, a private staff of accountants, lawyers, and investment managers whose only client is your last name. Full-service operations like this typically only make sense above roughly $250 million in assets. Below that, families share the staff, splitting a private office with other rich strangers who happen to need the same kind of discretion. Either way, the arrangement is the same. A quarterly report arrives. You did not request it. It tells you, in language written for accountants rather than for you, exactly what you are worth this quarter and what changed since the last one. You read it. You do not always understand every line. You sign where you are told to sign. This is the part of inherited wealth nobody puts in the thumbnail. At the exact moment your net worth becomes large enough to need full-time professional management, you stop being the person who understands your own finances best. The people you pay to protect the money now know more about it than you do. You are, technically, the client. In every meeting, you are treated like one. Greeted, briefed, walked through decisions that were mostly already made before you walked in. There is a particular kind of vertigo in being told by someone else exactly how rich you are. Not asking, being told. On a schedule you did not set, in a format you did not choose. Some heirs describe this stage as the first time the money stopped feeling like theirs in any daily, tangible sense. It became a portfolio, a quarterly document, a number managed by other people on your behalf, using your name. You still sign the checks that need your signature. There are fewer of those every year. The report will follow you into the next level, just differently shaped. Level 6. The Dynasty Trust Beneficiary. At $250 million and above, the family often stops holding the money directly. A trust holds it instead. You are simply named inside the document. This is a dynasty trust, and the mechanics behind it are almost too clean to be believed. Under current US law, each person can allocate a lifetime exemption, $15 million in 2026, into one of these structures, protected under something called a generation-skipping transfer. Set it up correctly, with what estate lawyers call a zero inclusion ratio, and that money compounds for decades without ever being taxed again as it passes down. $15 million, left alone for 50 years, can become well over $100 million, untouched by the tax that would have hit it at every ordinary handoff between generations. The trust is irrevocable. That word matters. Once it is signed, it cannot be undone. Not by you, not by the person who created it, not by a court, except under the narrowest circumstances. According to an investigation by ProPublica, at least 3 American billionaire families have used legal structures like this one to freeze the taxable value of their fortunes for decades, while the real value kept growing, untaxed, outside the estate. You, the beneficiary, are entitled to income, the interest, the dividends. What you are not entitled to, in most cases, is the principal, the actual core of the fortune. That belongs to a trustee, often a bank, sometimes a person you have met exactly once, at a conference table, for the specific purpose of being introduced to the person who controls your allowance. You can request a distribution. You can be denied one. The trustee's job, legally, is not to make you happy. It is to protect the trust, sometimes from the market, sometimes from taxes, sometimes, quietly, from you. This is the most expensive form of comfort ever built. It insulates a fortune from almost everything. Wars, divorces, bad decisions, its own beneficiaries. The trust was built to survive you. That was always the point, not to serve you. Level 7. The name bearer. Above $1 billion, the money becomes almost beside the point. The name is the asset now. At this level, your surname carries weight in rooms you will never enter. Say it at a hospital fundraiser, a university admissions office, a bank across an ocean, and doors open before you finish the sentence. This is the tier of families whose names function like brands, recognized on sight, valued, independent of any single person carrying them. 91 billionaire heirs inherited a combined $297.8 billion in a single year, according to UBS's 2025 Wealth Report, the largest one-year handoff of fortune ever recorded. Names like these are not incidental to that number. They are the mechanism that keeps it moving intact from one generation to the next. But a name that valuable has a maintenance cost. A single photograph taken at the wrong angle outside the wrong restaurant becomes a headline by morning. Not because you did anything illegal, because the family brand cannot afford the appearance of carelessness. This has always been the arrangement. Between the late 1800s and the Second World War, according to historical accounts, hundreds of American heiresses, the so-called dollar princesses, married into the British aristocracy, injecting something like £1 billion of American fortune into a nobility that had run out of cash. In exchange, they received a title. Their money bought status. Their presence kept centuries-old family names solvent. The trade has not changed. Only the direction has. Today, the name protects the money. In your grandparents' era, the money protected the name. Either way, someone is always being spent to keep the other asset alive. You learn to check your reflection in windows before you check it in mirrors, a habit built entirely around always being visible and never quite being off-duty. Your name became the asset. Now you have to protect it the way your ancestors protected the money. Level 8. The Foundation Steward. Storytelling. At this level, you stop signing personal checks. You start signing grants. The Family Foundation is the vehicle now, a formal structure built to direct philanthropic giving, often holding hundreds of millions, sometimes billions in assets earmarked for causes rather than consumption. You sit on its board. You approve its grants. You do not personally receive $1 of what passes through it. Picture the signature. $40 million committed to a new hospital wing. Your name on the letterhead of the foundation, not on the deposit slip of your own account. You have never had more power to redirect the future of an entire institution, and less permission to spend an ordinary evening without it being noticed. The wealth management industry has built an entire cottage sector around preparing heirs for exactly this transition, commonly called next-gen education. According to people who work inside that industry, the emphasis is almost never on how to enjoy money. It is on how not to lose it, and, increasingly, on how to give it away in ways that protect the family's reputation as much as the causes themselves. This is where inherited wealth stops looking like wealth at all in any personal sense. It looks like governance, committee meetings, due diligence on grant recipients, legal reviews of every gift over a certain threshold. You are, functionally, running a small institution. It has a mission statement. It has staff who do not work for you personally. They work for the foundation, which happens to carry your family's name. Somewhere in this stage, the line between the family and the institution stops being visible, even to the people living inside it. You stop asking what you want. You start asking what the foundation's board, often made up of relatives, will approve. Influence like this does not spend the way money spends. It cannot buy you a quiet Tuesday. It cannot buy back the version of your life where a purchase was simply a purchase and not a statement. What the foundation does not know yet is that influence is just another kind of leash. Level 9. The Family Patriarch/Matriarch. At the head of the family, you are no longer managing money. You are managing people who are managing money. Dozens of them, sometimes hundreds, spread across branches that have not spoken to each other warmly in years. Many families at this level maintain something the wealth industry calls a family constitution, a written document, part legal, part philosophical, meant to govern how the fortune is shared, who gets a board seat, whose children qualify for what. You did not write the version currently in use. You inherited it, the same way you inherited everything else. Now, you are its referee. Dinner becomes a negotiation. Two cousin branches disagree over control of the family's core business. Neither built it. Both believe they are entitled to it. You sit at the head of the table with a folder that says, in effect, here is how disputes like this one are supposed to be resolved. And you spend the evening enforcing rules you did not choose. Over money, none of the people arguing actually earned. Every family at this level believes they are the exception. 90% of them are not. Here is the number behind that sentence. Financial researchers describe it as shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. A pattern in which, according to widely cited industry studies, roughly 70% of family fortunes are gone by the 2nd generation, and 90% are gone by the 3rd. It has already happened, in full public view, to one of the richest families in American history. In 1877, Cornelius Vanderbilt died holding a fortune larger than the entire United States Treasury. Less than a century later, in 1973, 120 of his descendants gathered for a reunion at Vanderbilt University. According to Forbes's account of that day, not one of them was still a millionaire. The Dynasty Trust, the family office, the foundation, the Constitution. Every structure covered so far in this system exists in some form because of exactly this fear, that a fortune this size can still evaporate inside 3 generations, no matter how it is protected. You are the person standing between your family and that outcome. Nobody handed you a manual for how to prevent it. They handed you a folder, a title, and a room full of relatives who each believe the manual doesn't apply to them. Level 10. The Legacy. At the top of this system, you do not inherit money. You inherit a duty to protect money you are not allowed to spend. Dynasty trusts are often written with a clause for beneficiaries not yet born. Language lawyers use as a matter of routine, describing children and grandchildren who do not exist yet, who will, nonetheless, receive distributions from a document signed decades before their birth. You sign transfers today for people who cannot yet be named. This is not a metaphor. It is standard drafting language, sitting in a lawyer's office right now. You hold the title, the house, the seat on the foundation board, the surname that opens doors on 3 continents. And still, the actual core of the fortune is not yours to touch. It belongs to the family, the trust, the generations before you, and the ones that have not arrived yet. You are a caretaker with a very large office. The Medici family understood a version of this centuries before dynasty trusts existed. Nearly 300 years of financial and political power in Florence, patronage that helped build the Renaissance itself. And it ended in 1737. Not because of war or bankruptcy, but because the family line ran out of male heirs. A fortune built to last forever still depended on something no amount of money could purchase. Psychologists who study sudden and inherited wealth describe a specific condition at this level: guilt over money you did not personally earn, a quiet identity crisis, the sense that you are a custodian of something rather than an owner of it. It rarely gets sympathy. It is not supposed to need any. Here is the level 10 version of the level 1 problem. The account had your name on it, and the signature line did not. Now the institution has your name on it, and the decision still is not entirely yours either. A trustee somewhere, a board somewhere, a constitution written by people who are no longer alive to explain it. The richest tier in this hierarchy was never the freest one. It was simply the one with the most people watching to make sure you understood that. At level 1, a child cannot touch the money with their own name on it. At level 10, an adult cannot spend it either. It belongs to descendants who have not been born yet. The paperwork changed. The signature line did not. From the custodial account to the family constitution, someone else has always held the pen. The Medici built a dynasty that outlasted centuries and still ended the moment biology said no. The Vanderbilts built one that outlasted a single lifetime. Neither the poorest heir nor the richest one was ever free. A folded bank statement sits on a kitchen table. A child's name is printed at the top, 6 figures underneath it. The signature line belongs to someone else. Cornelius Vanderbilt's fortune once outsized the U.S. Treasury. 96 years later, 120 of his descendants gathered in one room. Not one was a millionaire. At $500,000, a trustee decides your allowance. At $50 billion, a board decides your legacy. The sum changes. The leash never does. By the end, you'll know exactly what inheriting money costs at every one of its 10 levels.